Before we a razor sharp, high-impact opening revealing a shocking statistic or unexpected fact about the Ingonyama Trust's power over land, or the scale of the rift emerging between the king and the board. A clear promise of what viewers will uncover. Hidden tensions, alleged sabotage, political undercurrents, with a hint that the biggest revelation lands near the end here are. It's astonishing how quickly stability can fracture when two powerful institutions, each rooted in heritage and authority, suddenly pull in opposite directions. What began as quiet murmurs within royal circles has now erupted into open tension, with King Misuzulu's stance hardening visibly in recent weeks. People close to the matter describe an atmosphere thick with mistrust, where once routine meetings now feel like contested battlegrounds. Rural leaders are whispering that this rift didn't emerge overnight, but has been growing under the surface for months, waiting for the smallest spark to ignite. A single disagreement can alter an entire kingdom. It's easy to underestimate the Ingonyama Trust until you recognize that it administers nearly 3 million hectares of land, roughly a third of KwaZulu-Natal. That scale alone transforms it from a conventional board into a land-based force that shapes livelihoods, access, development, and identity. Generations of families rely on tenure regulated through this single institution, making it a gatekeeper of rural power. Any instability inside its leadership reverberates instantly across villages, councils, and traditional authorities. Its influence reaches into politics, law, and culture, forming a web so interconnected that conflict at the top becomes impossible to ignore. Imagine hearing a monarch publicly hint that his own institution might be undermining him from within. That's the atmosphere surrounding King Misuzulu's startling suggestion that some board actions, or inactions, may amount to deliberate sabotage. The word itself changed the tone of the entire debate, shifting it from policy differences to something far more personal and provocative. Those close to the palace describe a sense of betrayal, a belief that certain moves were designed to embarrass or weaken the king's authority. When sabotage enters the vocabulary of leadership, it signals a conflict that has already escalated beyond mere disagreement. Tension thickens fast. Walk into recent meetings of the Ingonyama Trust Board, and you'd sense the heat before a single word is spoken. Reports suggest long silences, clipped exchanges, and decisions dragged out far beyond their usual timelines. Two senior members allegedly clashed over procedural issues that were once routine, while others avoided eye contact altogether. A dual reality has emerged. A board mandated to safeguard land rights, yet internally grappling with fractures that threaten its cohesion. Even staff members say the atmosphere feels different, colder, guarded, and unusually formal. Something fundamental has shifted in the room. There's a fascinating moment in any institutional conflict when outside forces begin circling, sensing opportunity. Political figures with historical interests in traditional leadership have reportedly begun positioning themselves close to the unfolding drama, offering advice, amplifying narratives, and nudging agendas. Conflict is rarely contained when political oxygen enters the room. Suddenly, debates about land administration intertwine with party dynamics, regional alliances, and personal ambitions. Conversations that were previously about governance now carry undertones of party rivalry and electoral strategy. When politics enters a dispute rooted in heritage, the temperature rises immediately. For families living on trust-administered land, uncertainty spreads quickly when leadership appears divided. A simple request for permission to build, lease, or farm becomes wrapped in fear that decisions might be delayed, reversed, or contested. Communities reliant on agricultural projects feel particularly exposed, with some already reporting slowed approvals and inconsistent communication. People who have lived on their land for generations worry about a future shaped by boardroom disputes rather than long-standing customs. It's remarkable how administrative tension at the top can ripple through household routines as quietly as it does powerfully. You can't fully grasp this rift until you follow the money. The trust's revenue streams, from leases to development partnerships, form a financial ecosystem that determines which communities receive support first, which initiatives get priority, and whose interests align with the broader mission. When tension appears between the king and the board, the question of financial stewardship quickly becomes central. Some insiders suggest that disputes over audits, procurement timelines, or reporting norms added friction long before the public realized something was wrong. Money may not be the whole story, but it rarely stays on the sidelines. Residents in several rural districts have begun sharing similar stories. Projects that once moved briskly now hover in limbo with no clear explanation. A community hall awaiting final approval, a farming cooperative waiting for lease adjustments, a road upgrade stuck in paperwork. Each case feeds speculation that internal turmoil may be affecting decisions on the ground. People who normally stay far from governance debates suddenly find themselves questioning why once straightforward processes now feel painfully slow. When delays multiply across different regions at the same time, rumors gain momentum and concerns harden into belief. Governance analysts observing the rift are raising concerns that stretch far beyond the headlines. Several specialists argue that when traditional authority and statutory institutions collide, the risk isn't only administrative paralysis, but long-term damage to public trust. They point out that the Ingonyama Trust occupies a legally unusual position, one foot in custom, another in constitutional frameworks, which makes conflicts like this especially volatile. Academics studying rural development note that even subtle leadership instability often triggers cascading effects that take years to reverse. Their warnings highlight how fragile institutional harmony can be when oversight and tradition overlap too closely. A quiet but unmistakable alignment of factions has begun forming around the dispute. On one side are those who feel the king's authority must remain unquestioned, especially in matters tied to culture and land identity. On the other are individuals loyal to the board's mandate, insisting that governance structures, not personalities, should dictate decisions. These emerging camps, often invisible to the public, shape narratives behind the scenes and amplify tensions without ever appearing together in the same room. The split isn't always ideological. Sometimes it's driven by personal history, regional alliances, or long-standing disagreements that the current crisis has revived. Every conflict grows sharper when private documents surface, and this one is no exception. A series of leaked memos, reportedly circulating among senior officials, hint at frustrations over reporting delays, unclear communication, and disputed internal procedures. Some extracts allegedly reveal disagreements about the pace of policy implementation, while others capture subtle criticisms of leadership decisions. These leaks have not been officially confirmed, but their content has intensified debate and deepened suspicion. A dual current now flows through the institution: public reassurances of stability and whispered concerns that internal resistance may be stronger than anyone is willing to admit. Traditional leaders across KwaZulu-Natal have begun articulating their own interpretations of the conflict, often shaped by local experience rather than official statements. Some see the rift as a moment of dangerous uncertainty, fearing that disputes in the upper structures could weaken customary authority at community level. Others view it as an inevitable clash brought on by years of administrative complexity and shifting political landscapes. Chiefs responsible for mediating land access are particularly sensitive to the tension, aware that people look to them for clarity they often don't have. Their reactions reveal how deeply the conflict touches the fabric of rural leadership. Behind every major institutional conflict lies a network of legal frameworks quietly shaping what can and cannot happen. Lawyers familiar with the Ingonyama Trust's founding legislation note that the current tension is occurring within unusually rigid statutory boundaries. Even small deviations from procedure can trigger consequences that ripple across multiple departments. Legal observers say this creates a delicate situation where every public statement, internal memo, or board decision must be measured carefully. At times, it feels as if the legal architecture itself has become a silent participant in the dispute, influencing decisions without ever being mentioned outright. Social media has turned the rift into a landscape of competing narratives, each gaining speed faster than official communication can keep up. Supporters of the king emphasize cultural sovereignty and historical stewardship, while others defend the board's mandate as essential for protecting rural land rights from political interference. Comment threads quickly devolve into heated debates, with people interpreting the same events through completely different lenses. In some communities, even family discussions have grown tense as personal loyalties intersect with governance debates. The digital arena has amplified the conflict's emotional weight with remarkable force. The heart of the storm lies in the king's belief that certain administrative obstacles may not be accidental. Those close to the palace describe delayed briefings, incomplete reports, and decisions inexplicably reversed at critical moments. Supporters argue that these patterns point to something coordinated rather than random. Meanwhile, individuals aligned with the board insist that administrative backlogs are common and should not be interpreted as intentional obstruction. The competing interpretations have hardened into a stalemate, with each side convinced that their reading of events is the most logical. The claims have become the dispute's defining flashpoint. Instability at leadership level carries consequences that reach far beyond the palace and boardroom. Should the rift continue, the trust may struggle to maintain consistent oversight of land administration, creating fertile ground for contested claims or misaligned projects. Development partners may hesitate to commit to long-term investments when institutional clarity appears uncertain. Even routine operations could be slowed by conflicting directives or hesitations within the administrative chain. Internally, morale may shift as staff navigate signals that feel increasingly contradictory. The institution's credibility relies heavily on unity, and prolonged division places that stability under visible strain. There's a noticeable shift in the king's recent posture, suggesting that he is no longer waiting for the trust's internal processes to resolve themselves. According to those familiar with palace discussions, he has started consolidating advisory networks, reaching out to traditional authorities, and strengthening his communication channels to rural communities. These steps are not overt declarations of confrontation, but rather a quiet restructuring of influence designed to prevent further erosion of authority. Observers say the tone around him has changed as well, firmer, more deliberate, and markedly less patient with prolonged uncertainty. Strategy is becoming his shield. Every conflict reaches a critical junction where one decision alters the rhythm of the entire dispute, and this rift appears to be approaching that moment. Multiple insiders hint that an upcoming board review, coupled with expected announcements from the king, may set the stage for a decisive turn. The atmosphere feels heavy with anticipation, as if both sides recognize that the next step will either widen the gap or force some form of recalibration. Meetings previously delayed are suddenly back on the calendar, and stakeholders across the province are quietly preparing for significant news. Change feels imminent. Before we continue, if you're following this unfolding rift and want deeper insight into traditional leadership, land governance, and power dynamics shaping South Africa's future, make sure you stay connected. These stories rarely move in a straight line, and every new development adds another layer to understanding the bigger picture. Every major dispute has shadow participants, individuals or groups who quietly gain from the chaos. In this case, whispers point to certain political intermediaries, regional power brokers, and even a handful of private interests who operate most effectively when institutions are distracted. When leadership is united, those actors have limited influence. When leadership is fractured, the field becomes wide open. Some insiders hint that specific figures have been unusually active in recent weeks, nudging narratives and encouraging divisions behind the curtain. Conflict often creates opportunities for those who thrive in ambiguity, and their presence is rarely acknowledged publicly. History offers a quiet warning about what happens when traditional and administrative structures fall out of alignment. KwaZulu-Natal has seen episodes where disagreements between chiefs, councils, and political authorities created long-term rifts that took years to mend. Those past conflicts reshaped alliances, disrupted community programs, and shifted the balance of influence in unexpected ways. Observers familiar with those periods note striking similarities in tone, language, and timing between then and now. The past doesn't repeat itself exactly, but its echoes can be surprisingly clear, especially when the same institutions stand at the center of tension. Speculation inside governance circles has intensified as people try to anticipate where this confrontation may ultimately land. One possibility is a formal restructuring of the board, a move that would recalibrate authority but could also deepen mistrust. Another involves mediation by national government actors, which historically brings its own complications. A third scenario is a negotiated settlement behind closed doors, quietly restoring order without public drama. Each path carries consequences for rural communities, political actors, and traditional leadership. For now, the uncertainty keeps everyone guessing, waiting for a definitive signal that has yet to arrive. In villages across the province, ordinary residents are adapting to a climate of unpredictability. Some community leaders are taking steps to document land use arrangements more thoroughly, hoping to shield households from potential administrative confusion. Others are adopting a wait-and-see posture, continuing their routines while watching leadership statements closely. Households with pending applications or development requests describe the emotional weight of not knowing when clarity will return. The sense of limbo varies from place to place, but the shared experience is unmistakable. Life goes on, but with an awareness that the decisions of distant offices now matter more than usual. What initially appeared to be a provincial matter has now begun touching national conversations. Politicians outside KwaZulu-Natal have started referencing the dispute to argue broader points about governance, traditional authority, and decentralized power. Parliamentary committees have taken a keener interest in the trust's operations, and several commentators have begun linking the rift to national debates on land reform. The situation has effectively become a reference point for discussions that extend far beyond rural boundaries. Even political parties preparing for upcoming elections seem to be watching closely, measuring how public sentiment around the dispute might influence their strategy. Amid the noise, one quiet but significant element rarely gets attention: the personal cost of leadership conflict. Those involved, on both sides, are carrying the strain of decisions that reverberate far beyond their desks. Advisors work late into the night drafting responses, chiefs field anxious questions from residents, and staff inside the trust navigate shifting instructions that change from week to week. Beneath the formal statements and public positions lies a human landscape shaped by fatigue, pressure, and the weight of history. When institutions collide, it is people, not structures, who feel it most intensely. This chapter in the relationship between King Misuzulu and the Ingonyama Trust has revealed a conflict that stretches far deeper than administrative disagreements. It's a story woven from history, politics, identity, land, and power, each thread pulling against the others as the rift widens. The stakes touch millions, shaping everything from rural livelihoods to national debates. And as the province waits for the next decisive move, one truth stands out: the outcome will not be small. Another shift is coming, and when it arrives, it will reshape the landscape once again. More developments are on the horizon,